I won't ever forget the first time I played through Shadow of the Colossus. Never before had I played a game that took my breath away or impressed me more. It made me realize that video games were capable of so much more than I thought possible. There are many aspects of the game that I think play into creating this feeling. The world, the enemies, and the scale of it all, just to name some of them. These are all often brought up in discussion. But what isn't discussed often, and what I believe plays a large role in creating this feeling of amazement, is the sheer ambition of it all. Ambition is thrown around a lot when talking about Shadow of the Colossus, but is really only used to describe the scale of the 16 boss battles. These boss battles were very ambitious for the time and still seem so to this day, but the ambition of this game extends much further than just the Colossi. In fact, the entire game is filled with ambition and revolutionary ideas that push the boundaries of gaming at the time, and I think the game became much better for it. Even before the start of the game, Shadow of the Colossus makes it blatantly clear that it's setting out to do something very different from the average game. The atmosphere that is created through the stunning environments, unique art style, and of course the beautiful score by Ko Otani in the opening cutscene is not one that was really present in video games. More than anything, what the cutscene conveyed was wonder, an emotion not explored too often in games. Right off the bat we can tell that we are in for an adventure of some kind and it won't be a happy one, but not necessarily sad either. The game takes a more neutral approach in the beginning. No positive or negative emotions are really present, which in itself is rather unusual. At this point we know we're in for something special, something a bit different from the average. The environment, the art style, and the soundtrack all play into creating this distinction. And how can we forget about the mind-numbing scale that it introduced us to with the bridge shot? And the best part, we're able to control the camera throughout all of this. Shadow of the Colossus assures us that these amazing sights that we are witnessing are all rendered in-game, and we'll be playing through a similarly breathtaking environment in just a moment. This is the first bit of ambition presented to us in Shadow of the Colossus, and we haven't even begun to play yet. The beauty of it all and the excellent direction leaves the player in awe, and gives them the impression that they are in for something a bit different from the norm here. Something distinct. This is later reinforced when we were given control for the first time. The camera pans as if the game is giving us an invitation to explore this wonderful world that has just been offered up to us. The second moment of on, the second time we really experience this ambition firsthand, is when we ride Agro out into the world for the first time. Immediately, we are presented with a seemingly endless world as we step outside and are first blinded by the light. Stepping outside, we begin to realize just how massive this world is. While games like Grand Theft Auto had maps that rivaled the size of Shadow of the Colossus, they certainly didn't feel as big. Not only did Shadow of the Colossus create a world of massive scale, it also felt massive, much more massive than it actually was. The game continues to build on the feeling of awe here, and continues to draw a distinction between itself and other games of the time. The path leading up to the first Colossus takes a step back to introduce some mechanics and to explain the gameplay to the player. It also restricts your viewpoint for the first time to a smaller area, bringing the scale of the world back down a bit, and making the game feel a bit more grounded than it had in previous scenes. Because it restricts you here, the game is able to open up again and produce a feeling of wonder in the player once more when the top of the cliff face is reached. Here, we experience something greater than anything up to this point, the first Colossus. The game letterboxes the screen as the camera pans up to focus on a giant beast lumbering across the screen that in any other game would be relegated to cutscenes, in the case of something like God of War taking it on in small portions at a time. The amazing amount of detail and scene only furthers the ambition the game presents the player with. The music, the screen shaking, the movement of the tree and its leaves on the left side of the screen, and of course the Colossus' movements. And after the short cutscene, the game gives you back control and prods you to go kill it. Up to this point, the game has presented Water as a pretty average guy, and so the task that the game has set up for the player seems both daunting and surreal. Herculean, in fact. At this point, the game's ambition makes itself apparent to anyone experiencing the game, and the battle and subsequent defeat of the Colossus only adds to this. The feelings experienced here by the player only continue throughout the game, as Shadow of the Colossus continually one-ups itself through the remainder of the fights right up to the final one. Throughout the game, the player will inevitably notice many more instances of Fumito Ueda's and his team's ambition, one of the most apparent of these being the game's physics. From fairly early on, it becomes evident that most everything in the game is governed by the game's physics engine, something few other games had even attempted. Every bit of movement in this game gives off a sense of dynamism, which is really interesting and refreshing. Since everything is open-ended and the player is only bounded by the physics set in place, some cool interactions can take place, whether that be finding an interesting, unorthodox way of defeating a boss or simply moving about the game world. This all adds to the feeling of freedom in the game, but also makes it feel fresh and new. It becomes very easy to appreciate all the effort that was put into this aspect of the game. And it's not just the mechanics or visuals of the game that are ambitious, it's also the story and how the game decides to tell that story. Shadow of the Colossus has a very simple story on the surface while being a somewhat story-focused game. A guy brings his deceased girlfriend to a forbidden land where he makes a deal with a voice to kill 16 Colossi, and in exchange will bring her back to life. But in the end, you may have been the bad guy all along. However, upon further inspection, the story is much more than that. Much of the story can be found in the world. All the interesting areas that there are to be explored and the world design certainly give us a lot to think about. Much like Dark Souls in that sense, but smaller and a bit less direct. There are a number of games that do this, but what makes the storytelling in Shadow of the Colossus so great and unique is the way it tells a story through its gameplay. The movements of the Colossi and Wonder being a more obvious example of this. A really nice addition for anyone who is paying enough attention. The game was also able to maintain that same atmosphere of wonder and amazement from the opening cutscene throughout the entirety of the game, which adds so much to the story itself. This unconventional way of telling a story further emphasized the refreshment and awe felt by the player, due to just how unique and carefully crafted the storytelling methods and the story actually were. Shadow of the Colossus seems to make itself as much of an experience as is a game due to all the ambition and risk-taking design choices. The game excels at getting an emotional response out of the player in any given situation. The defeat of the Colossi being an example is brought up most often, but it can be found anywhere in the game. From the wonder that is felt when exploring the world map, to the shocking twist at the end of the story, there's something new to experience around every turn in this game. Very rarely is a game able to inspire so many emotions in the player and handle them all so well. Emotions not too often explored in games at that, and it is able to use these emotions to get us invested and immerse us in its beautiful world. All things that add to the experience that is Shadow of the Colossus. Scarcely do we get games that seem to be more than just a game, and I think this is an area where Shadow of the Colossus exceeds with flying colors. It transcends just being limited to the digital world and starts to mean something real. I think this is what it means for a piece of art to be an experience. Alone, I believe Shadow of the Colossus to be an amazing game, but it's the ambition and uniqueness to push it over the top for me. I don't think Shadow of the Colossus would have been as good of a game if there were similar ones which had come out before it. It was the vision of Ueda that made this game so special and inspired so many. Without his dedication and attention to detail, Shadow of the Colossus would have been a much different game. It would be almost unrecognizable. Sure, it may look similar and have the same premise, but it's the small things that take these ideas that are good on their own and make something amazing with them. Without such a vision and attention to detail, Shadow of the Colossus would control like any other game from the time. The Colossi would probably be treated more like the gods in God of War, something that works really well in God of War but doesn't really seem to fit Shadow of the Colossus. And so much of the content itself most likely would not be there. The boundaries of gaming would not have been pushed, and Shadow of the Colossus probably wouldn't have stood out from the crowd. It would have been just another cool game to come out. It's the ambitions of it all that defines Shadow of the Colossus and makes it so awe-inspiring to play rather than just another averagely good game. In essence, it's the ambition of Ueda-san and his team that really makes Shadow of the Colossus Shadow of the Colossus. And so I would like to say, Team Ico, thank you for all of your work and dedication in creating this fantastic game. Without it, this game just wouldn't be the same. Hey guys, Mitopphic here. So that was my first gander at trying to make a video, and I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about it in the comment section down below. Well, for now, I'll see you next time. Mitopphic, signing off.